Hey, Steve Mignani here doing the junkyard crawl at Bernardston Auto Wrecking in Bernardston, Massachusetts with a 1969 Chevy El Camino. Now, we all know our Chevy history, and this was the 10th model year for the El Camino, which launched in 1959 as Chevrolet's belated response to the 57 Ford Ranchero. Now, keep in mind, there were no El Caminos in 1961, 62, or 63. But in 64, the El Camino was downsized from the full-size platform to the A-body like this. Now, this is a second generation A-body, this one here, 68 through 72. And one thing about the El Camino is that it rides on a 116-inch wheelbase, which was shared with four-doors and wagons, whereas the two-door El Caminos rode on a 112-inch wheelbase. But again, this is the truck and car, the deluxe ute, as they call these in Australia. But again, these were very popular sellers. About 50,000 of these were built in 1969. And the interesting thing about El Caminos is the fact that they have a gas filler on the side, as did the wagon, whereas Chevelles and Malibus had the gas filler in the rear bumper down low behind the license plate. So kind of an interesting detail. Here's the original gas tank right here. And we can see this would have been located sideways in the car like that. This neck would have come up through there and fed. We could probably fix some gas tank sealants, probably bring it back to life without too much trouble. But inside this one, we can see this one was fairly bare bones, has the bench seat. The SS 396 was first seen right in 68. And again, that was the muscle car version. You could get the 396 in a 67 El Camino, but it was not a Super Sport. But again, for 68, the El Camino joined the Malibu in Super Sport land. Now, here's the thing. This is the 1969 Chevelle catalog right here. But the Chevelle line was so prolific that the Chevelles got their own catalog, the wagons got their own catalog, and the El Camino got its own catalog. So that's why you don't see any reference here to a wagon or a El Camino. But here's the thing. The two doors, again, rode on a 112-inch wheelbase, whereas the four doors had a 116-inch wheelbase. Not very accurately rendered here. The rear axle should be a little further back on this GM illustration. But again, they're not the same frame. But we do have a small thing here that's kind of cool. This is the Campers and Recreational Vehicles catalog for 1969 right here. This is basically about pickup trucks and vans and serious camper machines. But El Camino did get a page. It got its own little square right down here. There's nothing else like it on the road, except for the Ford Ranchero, but don't tell Chevrolet that. Take half of the most luxurious car you can imagine, add half of the toughest pickup truck, and you've got a 69 El Camino. Nothing even comes close. Road eating power up to a 396. You get straddle buckets, all that good stuff. And again, the SS 396, we can see there, has the SS on the tailgate. And that's truly a muscle pickup truck. And again, 396 cubic inches, 325 or more horsepower. No six bangers in SS in Chevelle land. Now here's that frame right here. This had so much rust that it was picked up at some point. And this is the rear axle right here. Now this is a 10 bolt. When we know that, if you see a bolt at the noon and the 6 o'clock positions, that's a 10 bolt. Although it looks like a 12 bolt with that rib right there. That's basically a flow diverter for gear lube to the side bearings. But again, one thing about El Camino frame is that it's boxed. Unlike the C channel seen under two doors, this frame right here was once a box section, which allowed the El Camino body to be stiffer with the 800-pound load that was possible. Now this rear axle here is the original 10 bolt. Again, this is not a Super Sport, that would be a 12 bolt. But something I see on this are air shocks right here. There's one of the air shocks with the bladder. And keep in mind, from 73 onward, El Camino came standard with air shocks in the back. But in 68, 69, air shocks were not standard. So these were added by somebody who wanted to make the most of the load-bearing capacity of this one. Now on the front fender, this, when I was a kid, used to confuse me. 307. First seen in 1968. Is that the 302 Z28 motor plus 5 cubic inches? Is it even cooler than the Z28's 302? No. Let's remember that the 302 and the Z28 had a 4-inch bore and a 3-inch stroke. It was built for SCCA Trans Am homologation, 5-liter limit, 290 very underrated horsepower. Meanwhile, the 307 we see right here actually had a 3.87-inch bore and a 3.25-inch stroke. So smaller bore, longer stroke, and 200 horsepower, which is probably optimistic, probably more like 180. All 307s were 2-barrel carbureted, no 4 barrels, no single exhaust, although duals were supposedly optional. But again, these are not even Ram's manifold, just a log manifold on these things. So the 307 was the workhorse engine, and again, had a smaller bore and a longer stroke, which means less high RPM capability. And with the smaller bore, you're shrouding the valves even worse than you would be with a 302. It was 4-inch bore. So if you see a 307, it's not a 302 plus 5 cubes. It's a whole different critter. It's a station wagon engine. These were used for many years, but again, and we can see on this one, it had power brakes. This one had drums up front. We can see disc was certainly optional, but you can see on the back side of that wheel, that finned iron drum with the ribs, that is the drum brake there. Of course, discs were optional, but this is the front power drum option. Power steering originally specified on this particular example here. And again, this is just your basic 307 automatic El Camino. Around this side here, one thing to keep in mind is that 1968 and 69, the front fenders can be used on a 2-door or a 4-door or a wagon, but in 70, 71, and 72, the front fenders are actually different size on an El Camino. You can't use the front fenders from one of these on a 2-door from 70 through 72. Little junkyard pro tip right there. Inside, again, we see on this one the bench seat up front. No sexy super sport, no 4-speed, none of that stuff going on here. The original, I think, Marina blue still kind of in effect. And this one here being a New England car or truck, you call it. Look at the ROPs, the pop rivets. Somebody's effort to replicate the wheel lip right there, riveted back on. And again, in Massachusetts, as long as you don't have visible body rust or holes, if you cover it with sheet metal like this, you're good for an inspection sticker. Crazy but true. But then again, the frame is something that's a whole nother story, and we saw how this thing broke in half when it was moved. But that's the story of how 1969 was the 10th model year for El Camino, and sales were strong, and these were continued into production into the 1980s. So again, America's car and truck, along with the Ranchero, the Chevy El Camino. Now, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to the Steve Mag's YouTube channel. Give this a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and hit the bell so that you're aware of the next video, which comes out tomorrow morning.